G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and in today's episode we're going to be looking at the Nova Open previews. Now, I intend to cover the Heresy releases because that's what's most important to me. If you really want, we can look at the other stuff, but there are a ton of different channels out there that look at that. It's not really my focus here. But please, if there is enough interest, let me know in the comments, and I may get around to it. Anyway, I'm not going to keep the suspense rolling. We're just going to jump straight into Fulgrim. So, Demon Fulgrim. I think this looks really good. Really, really good. This is better by far than any of the 40k Primarchs, who are really the ascended form. Yeah, I'm really happy with it. Probably because it's a resin one, I'm guessing, being handled by Forge World Studio, as opposed to a plastic one being held by Games Workshop. Yeah, well, that kind of explains it. Are there any details I dislike on him? Well, it's hard to tell with what we've got, but the hair looks good, the wings, there's no silliness going on there. There's no random teeth or tentacles or other crap like they do on all the other Demon Primarchs. Those are the sort of things that let down Angron. Angron was really, really close to being the perfect Primarch in his 40k form. And they had just random teeth coming out of bits of armor and things that made no sense. We got none of that with Fulgrim, which is perfect. Great, that's what I love to see. Where we do have things like random teeth and such here on the belt, that's because that's clearly a demonic visage in there, a bit of asymmetrical detail. It's just to echo the Keepers of Secrets and such. And yeah, it works really well for me. So does the Palatine Aquila turning into claws in a way. That's a natural transition. It's not like there's just on his forearm random teeth just sticking out like two teeth. That's what Angron's Pitfall was. Mortarian's Pitfall looks nothing like his 30k self. This Fulgrim definitely looks like his 30k self. So that works. And unlike Magnus, he doesn't have any giant random quagmire when he discovers internet porn arm. Fantastic. The weapons are also not comically overdone. They suit the aesthetic or the tone of the Heresy as much as a Demon Primarch can be said to ascribe to tone. I also really like what they've done here with the bits of flayed human flesh, the skin, the faces of Astartes on the cloak. That is very grimdark and I love it. If I was painting this model though, I'd have done something more interesting with the feathers than the white. That's got nothing to do with the model, just personal taste. I think they would look really nice in a peacock feather. Something like that would look really good. Yeah, no, this is fantastic. Even the base. The base is surprisingly tasteful. It's a tactical rock. I mean, it was always going to be, but compared to what we've seen with some of the other Primarchs, I mean, Horus is a bad example. The Horus Ascended, which I'm not a huge fan of, has a base covered in skeletons and power armor and all sorts. Like he's stepped straight out of Terminator 2 Judgment Day's opening scene. None of that. This is basically as good as it gets. Do I think it's a better Fulgrim than the other Fulgrim we have? Well, obviously they're two very different Primarchs. One is pre-Demonhood, potentially could be used as a Great Crusade Fulgrim. This one, I really like it. Would I add it to my collection? That's the question. I'll have to come back to that. Alright, moving on. We have the plastic Deredeo. We all knew it was coming. I like this. They have improved on the basic sculpt ever so slightly by adding a bit of trim or such on top of the hull. I'm guessing that's going to be an optional feature, that you don't have to use that gold trim. But I like that it's there as an option, because compared to the other Dreadnoughts, the Deredeos are very, very, very plain, which is fine, and I do appreciate that. But giving people the option of some sculpt on detail to help them feel more similar, I think that's a good approach. I also like the got the different Sons of Horus icon, the different Eye of Terror on the knee. Yep, that looks good. Is it what the game needed most? No, of course not. Is that an issue though? I don't think so personally. It rounds out the Dreadnoughts, which is, we needed it for a while now. Then we get to these. Now, I've been going in a different direction with the Outer Circle for about a month now. New intro, new microphone, new style of videos where I just want to talk about the hobby as a whole. The things I like and focus on that more than I want to look at the bad corporate decision making of Games Workshop, because I feel that, well, it speaks for itself. They've made so many bad decisions that it really doesn't need an introduction. And yet we find ourselves here. So I'm just going to cover off on the dot points rather than going to a long-winded rant about the situation. First dot point, we did not need a fourth tactical squad. And if we were going to get a fourth tactical squad, Mark II or Mark V would have been the preference. I think I can speak safely for the majority of people on that one. Second point, why are they in different Mark III? It's a very odd choice. This is much more like Fafnir ran, and he's completely different in style to the old Mark III. Now nothing quite blends or matches. Third point, the power armor is going to be a different scale. We know this because this armor is that same sort of scale as the new Mark VI. Therefore, it's going to look a bit weird in armies that are full of the other scale. And fourth point, these are a lazy reskin of the Mark VI power armor, right down to that Power Fist is identical to the Mark VI Power Fist, with the same fingers and the little joints in the fingers and everything. The poses on the models, the way that the wrists are, this is a carbon copy of the Mark VI squad with a Mark III skin laid over the top. And that is very lazy. But I'm going to offer up the thought that this is so that the heavy weapons match between the two different squads. That is my thought here. So if I go back and look at the Sergeant, look at the pose, little bend in the elbow, the forward tilt on the wrist firing the plasma pistol, and then we look over at Games Workshop, and we have that exact same thing. Bend in the elbow, forward twist, pointing the muzzle downwards on the plasma pistol. Then of course we've got our squad, and let's see this pose here. We have the leg towards the rear, this leg standing up. Leg towards the rear, that leg standing up. Okay, how many poses can you really do the same? Looks like the same upgrade set, because that helmet is definitely in the Mark VI box, and so is that symbol, so is that helmet. So yeah, a lot of the same look transferring across, and now everyone has the Pickelhaube, the spiky Mark III helmet, which I'm not necessarily against. I would like the option of two helmets though, one with and one without the spike, if it's a molded on feature and not a separate part. Just because it was in the old Heresy artwork from, 30 years ago, which is a bit outdated these days, but, it's cool for nostalgia purposes. What else have we got in here that's very similar? Let's look at... Yeah, I think this guy in the back left with the bare head and the fact that the legs sort of cross over one another, I'm pretty certain that that exact same pose is available in our power armor. Why do I say that? Because there it is right there. So yeah, this is just a carbon copy of the exact same miniatures, lazily resculpted in a new scale that nobody asked for. The design priorities are all over the place, so I'm not going to harp on about it anymore. You can see it for yourself, and if you disagree with me, that's great. Let me know below, and I'll be sure to file it in the very important file. Last thing to look at today, Indominus Terminators. Now, Indominus Terminators are for 40k, however, the armor is used in the Heresy. Now, I would not be using it with any of the Crux Terminatus symbology because that's not used yet in the Heresy. That doesn't exist as we define it in 40k. I would probably also change out the helmets. And there are some awesome STLs online for different shoulder pads for the Terminators that look much more era appropriate. But this armor was starting to come in during the Horus Heresy, being phased in. And so it is a good idea to, showcase it. And I do think they've done a good job of it. However, it is gigantic. Now, whilst that tickles the fancy of people in, say, 40k or such, there is a huge scale creep problem even within the range of the Space Marines. And if you've got something like a Palatine Blade next to these Terminators, they come up to their armpit. This is a bit of a problem, and it's a self-inflicted problem. This is not the fault of the community. This is entirely the fault of the company, just changing scales as they feel like it constantly. And the flow-on effect, for better or for worse, is that we end up in a situation where people sort of feel like they have to repurchase miniatures because now nothing is in the correct scale and it looks like a real mishmash. And the common defense I hear of this is, well, Marines all come in different sizes, Macca. Yeah, they do. People come in all different shapes and sizes, but there's two problems. First, once you get up to 7 feet tall, like a Space Marine, 1 inch of height difference, it's hardly noticeable compared to if you're a 3.4 foot tall hobbit and you have an extra inch. That's pretty noticeable because that's a significant percentage more. Well, in Space Marines, you'd think that the average height would sort of blend out, but what we end up with is, here's the squad of short guys, and here next to them is the squad of tall guys, and never the two shall meet. That's the issue. So don't say, oh, well, Space Marines come in all different shapes and sizes, because then you have to explain to me why all the tall guys are in Mark 6 and why all the short guys were in Mark 4, or the old Mark 2 resin armor, for instance. Explain that to me. Explain how this works in your head. I'm very curious what the logic is here, people. So, yeah, but, if you're fine with the scale, go for it. Personally, I would just print a nicer set of Terminators than this, because these are nice, but you can get nicer for cheaper. And there is also a chaplain who has one of those Reaver face masks, which is trying too hard to be edgy, and I will die on that hill. But apart from that, very easy to do head swap, I'm sure. This is a perfectly lovely model, and I think with just some very minor changes would suit in a 30k army quite well. So remove the Crux Terminators, change out that dinky head, and you're pretty much there. In fact, if you gave him Tartarus shoulder pads, for example, or use parts of this model on, let's say, Cataphracti legs or Cataphracti arms, you could keep the same hand with the Crozius, for example, swap out that Storm Bolter to a Combi Bolter. You've made an interesting HQ for your Heresy army. And he's going to be big and he's going to stand out. So if you're into the Marines being like orcs and the HQs are all bigger than everyone else around them because they're the boss, they're the best, then shoot away. This is the game for you now. But yeah. And of course we have this captain here who has the same sort of cloak tucked under the chest plate thing going on. That's a design feature I really want to die. Nobody asked for it. Nobody that I've noticed seems to really appreciate it. I don't know why they're persisting with it. I think it's just to cover up the waist and trying to sculpt some sort of detail in there and working out how the armor overlaps. They just go, cover it with a cloak. It'll be fine. That's my guess, of course, and that's the cynical guess. But also, I want to point out that this is the first time in a long time that Macrodamus has been wrong, because my prediction for which Primarch they would cover was Lorgar transfigured. I thought, Lorgar's not people's favourite Primarch, and it did change throughout the Heresy, becoming Lorgar transfigured. Maybe they'll do something with him, leveraging the fact that Lorgar has fallen to chaos pretty damn hard, and is definitely changed because of it. I would have thought they would have reserved Demon Fulgrim for 40k. That they would do a version of him in plastic instead first. So to see him come out, it tells me two things. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon the Emperor's Children get their 40k releases, and I don't think that when that time does come, that they're going to look like this Fulgrim. I think it's going to get the same sloppy treatment the other 40k Primarchs have got. And if people love the 40k Primarchs and think my opinion's wrong, that's totally cool, because that's the beauty of it. I've got my opinion, you've got your opinion, and neither of us can ever be truly right. But I am. Anyway, alright, back with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching the episode. I hope you got a little something out of it. Obviously, anytime they do these sort of videos, these corporate releases, there is going to be some eyeball rolling, basically, because they always make a mistake of some kind. In this case, the model that was most crucial to get right, Fulgrim, they nailed it. They got the Derrideo right. The Terminators, they're good. The scale's just a bit big. Where they fell down was only in the power armor department, because no one wanted, no one needed, and they just pig-headedly went ahead and did it anyway. And I think that's the issue here, is they're not listening to the customer base very well when they do a release like this. Because if they had, they could have made this in Mark II, and they would be selling so much they wouldn't know how to keep it in stock. That is my personal belief, and feel free to challenge it in the comments below. See you all next time.